As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis. As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and a question that you may not have contemplated is, what does fashion have to do with politics? What does fashion have to do with worldview? Well, maybe if you've seen the recent Barbie movie, you think everything, because fashion, of course, interacts with culture. But if that's a question you haven't really thought a lot about, my guest today has some very interesting theories and discussion points. He is an anon, meaning that he has an anonymous account and goes by Necktie, which is his moniker on social media. So we won't be having video today for that reason, because, of course, we like to keep people who want to keep their identity hidden. Of course, they can come on the show anonymously. But you're definitely going to want to hear what he has to say about fashion and how that influences and actually evidences what we think about culture and what we think about God. Stay tuned for this.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time, anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you. All right, so joining me now is Necktie Salvage, who is, of course, an anonymous account, but also talks about how style affects culture and politics, how fashion can be used to change society for better or worse. And I think this is a really interesting concept because we all see how fashion does affect culture, and how culture, of course, is upstream from politics, which, of course, I would say that culture is downstream from worldview. So, Necktie, what is your overall premise, and how did you actually get involved in even talking about this particular aspect of culture?
Well, style, clothing, aesthetics, they represent culture. They're a face of our culture. This comes to personal aesthetics and broader aesthetics, collective aesthetics as well. When it comes to our style, we reveal something about what we believe, our values. It says something about our personal values, about our group values. And when we look around today, when you look at what we see in terms of how men dress, because I focus on men's clothing. But when we look at how men dress today, what does it reveal about our civilization and about our trajectory? Does it say something positive? Does it say something high? Or does it say something low? And that is what animates me in this project. It is this idea of a higher version of man, a higher image of man, because what we see today in our culture is a very low image. It's not an image of man in ascent. It's not an image of our civilization in ascent. It is cultureless, and it degrades man, in fact. And so when I talk about aesthetics and style, I'm talking about the spiritual thrust of man and our civilization.
And so are you a Christian, or what is your worldview in terms of the spiritual aspect and nature?
Well, I'm traditionally religious, obviously. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
obviously a deep religious aspect to all of this. I'm traditional Jewish. And so
Okay.
much of my ideas are rooted in this, are rooted in my faith, and rooted about this idea of different forms of man and woman and how we represent
Mhm.
those different forms. And we are created in the image of God, and we are not beast. Man is different. And so there's a lot of layers to this. Oftentimes people will think about style as being a materialistic thing. It's not. It's actually a deeper thing. We're getting to an idea about what it says about us. And we are not a beast. We're not animal. We wear clothing. Clothing itself is civilization because we're covering up ourselves. There is this religious element to this. About dignity. And that's why when I talk about clothing and I talk about man's presentation, I talk about every man. I don't talk about just one sliver of men, but I talk about the broader idea about man's dignity and the dignity of man himself. And our clothing can either elevate us or degrade us. And what we see today, and we see it across our culture, we see a totally beat down man and a totally beat down spirit. And that is related to our clothing. It's like a cycle. It's like chicken or egg, you know? It reaffirms itself, and it keeps going in a cycle.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right that the Bible does speak to the dignity of man and the cultural aspect of clothing. And I mean, even in the Old Testament, with what the priests would wear to distinguish them from everyone else in society, and there is an inherent dignity to what we do with our bodies that culture now is trying to degrade. And there is an artistic value as well. We know inherently that there's a difference between beauty versus something that is not beautiful and is ugly and perverse. And so that aspect of how clothing and style is cultural, I think, is really fascinating. And so what we're seeing today in culture, and you're talking specifically about men, is the effeminization really of men. And, you know, all of these, the ways that young men are taught to dress and act and look, in my view as a woman, I don't find that attractive at all, because I think that men are being encouraged to be effeminate, to be queer, to be anything other than masculine men.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, I completely agree with you. And whether it's Deuteronomy 22:5, or whether we're talking about, as you said, the specific high priest, what he would wear in this sort of formality, the Bible is very concerned with what we wear and how we present ourselves, and not only setting role, but also the distinction between man and woman. And what you're talking about with how men are taught to dress today by our society, it's what we see is a total androgynous slop, is what I see. Is we see no distinction. It's a melting down of forms. And there's this absolutely fascinating thing. Go back to our grandparents' generation, the greatest generation or before. The idea that, because sometimes I'll encounter guys who say, oh, I shouldn't care about how I look, whatever. No. They are essentially turning themselves over into the slop, into the androgynous slop that our society is pushing onto them. If you go back to our grandfather's generation or before, men took care to present themselves in a way that was decent and dignified. And it was a way which reaffirmed a strong image of man, whether it's suits, whether it's sport coats, whether it's distinct garments and distinct wear that reaffirmed them culturally, in terms of their culture and themselves as men. But today we see this boiling down of forms, this destroying of forms into this just androgynous, bubbling slop. And when men say, well, I don't care about how I dress, I shouldn't care about how I dress, we don't have to care about how we dress, that is dead wrong. And they're just lowering themselves into the thrust of our society, which is just right down to the basement.
And I'm speaking with Necktie Salvage, who is, of course, an anonymous account, but you can follow him on social media at Necktie Salvage. And this is a really fascinating viewpoint that I think it transcends any particular culture, because in every culture, regardless of whether this is ancient or whether this is modern, there was always a differentiation and distinction between what women looked like and dressed like and what men looked like and dressed like. And so for the critic who might say, well, look back at, maybe the Roman Empire where everybody wore robes, and so there wasn't really this distinction. That I think is a faulty presumption, because there was always a measurable difference between what is masculine versus what is feminine, even if that looks different based on the time period or the culture. You can always go back, even in art and literature and paintings, you can see and readily identify the difference between a man versus a woman. But as you're pointing out, that's what our society currently and our culture is trying to break apart and trying to completely eviscerate, is this measurable difference between the dignity and ultimately the image of God that the Bible tells us in Genesis 1. He made them male versus female. And so how do you respond to the critic that says, well, this is just totally cultural, and so these ideas of masculine versus feminine are just social constructs?
That's, this is obviously ridiculous. So as you said very eloquently, different cultures in different times of history have different garments which signify man or woman, or different modes of beautification which signify man or woman. And when they don't, this is obviously this is not a culture that is anything worthy of emulating, because often people will cite, oh, what about this culture? I don't care about that culture. Like they're like, oh, what about some far off, distant culture that was in total degeneration and that was just this wicked culture? Yeah, I don't care about that culture. Like you said, we're going back to the Bible here. And let's set the Bible aside. Still, we'll go to the majority of any society that we will find throughout history. You have this differentiation. The garments may change, but the signal that the garments signify, which is a separate and distinct form of man and woman, that is eternal. So we have, like, for example, the kilt. The kilt is a unique garment of a specific people in a specific place. It's not a dress. That's not a skirt. That's a kilt. That's something of a specific place. In our society, women wear pants, but women don't wear men's suits. Mm-hmm. We all know what's going on here. Whenever people try to get you wrapped up in this stupid, myopic game where they try to say, well, actually, what about this? What about this? No. We know exactly what's going on. There are shared garments between men and women. Of course, women have shirts. Men have shirts. Women will wear pants. Men wear pants. Some people might not, some different religious sects might not want women to wear pants, but many women wear pants. So we could say this is a shared garment. We all know that when a man puts on a dress, we know what's going on there. This is not actually in history, we know what it is. It's an attempt to subvert and destroy forms. We know what the situation is when a woman puts on a man's suit. We know what's going on. And so whenever people try to poke holes in this argument, it's all hinging on the presumption that you're not going to tell the rules of the game, which is that we're supposed to ignore what's really going on,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I find it fascinating that the very same people who say that masculine versus feminine is a social construct and that there is no difference between any of these garments, then want to buck that same system by having the man who has facial hair and a mustache wear a dress that is obviously feminine. And so it's implicit in the garments. And even though there are some types of garment, the type itself, whether it's pants or shirt, as you've said, can be men versus women. The way that it's worn, the type, is very clearly masculine versus feminine. And this transcends across cultures, as we've been talking about, that the garments that identified women as feminine versus men as masculine, regardless of what was unique to that culture or how the styles have progressed throughout history, there's always been that clear differentiation. And women have looked feminine, beautiful, soft, all of these things that make women women. And men have looked strong, powerful, and all of these things that make them masculine. And so what is it that men in particular, since you're primarily speaking to men, that they should take away from looking at our current culture and the way that we are trying to blur the lines, even with things like athletic wear? Like, I just find it so lazy when, what happened to the men that want to dress in power suits? What happened to the men that want to, look strong and look powerful? And then, they just sit around in like boxer shorts all day. It's kind of gross. This
is one of my great crusades, is the crusade against athleisure. And so this athleisure is cultureless, ahistorical, androgynous slop in physical form. There is no, think about athleisure. It is anti-culture, cultureless globalism, androgynous globalism, without any culture, anti-culture, consumerism in physical form. There's no distinction of man and woman. There's no history behind it, because when we talk about our garments, there's history behind garments. I focus on Ivy style and prep style. There's deep history behind the fabrics and the garments and how it's worn. And it reflects our history here in America. Athleisure wear, athletic wear, this androgynous giving up. It is giving up. But if you really look at what it represents there is no history. There is no culture. There is no place. There is no form. It is also totally synthetic. There's no natural, organic texture. There's no connection to the organic world. It is synthetic nothingness. That is what athleisure is. And men, what I would say to men, and what I say to men all the time, is you look around and we all know what's going on. Like I said, don't play stupid. People play stupid. Whenever they try to pretend what's going on, they say, oh, well, actually, they used to wear this. Actually, no. We know what's going on when a man puts on a dress. We know what's going on when a woman puts on a man's suit. We know exactly what's going on. I'm not going to play stupid. I'm not going to play our games. Look around. What game is being played is a melting down of forms, a destruction of forms, a destruction of creation, you could say. Creation as God created it. And if you want to make a signal against that, you don't have to say anything. You can say it all in your aesthetic. As a man, you can present yourself as clearly a man, as a man with a culture and with a history, and a strong man, and a man connected to the natural world, wearing natural fabrics, clothes that make him not only look strong, but feel strong, not only feel confident, but look confident. And it's clothing that you can, every single time you step out onto the street, you are sending a signal. You are representing something. So what do you want to represent? Do you want to represent just the descent into this formless slop? Or do you want to say something else? Do you want to say something higher? Do you want to affirm something stronger for man? And other men see you. And even if they don't say that you're changing their mind, you'll change one of their minds. You will. And same thing for young boys. Same thing if you have sons. If you have sons, it is incredibly important for you to teach them an aesthetic language, an approach to dressing. You don't want to turn them over to the mainstream society. So that's what I say to them.
Absolutely. And I could not agree with you more. And I think it's very well put to say that the athleisure and the sort of nothingness that is the sweatshirt and sweatpants kind of part of our cultural phenomenon of clothing that's not even style is just androgynous nothingness. And it's on purpose trying to blur the lines, and it's on purpose trying to be as boring and as undignified as possible. And so, and what you said at the very beginning of this episode, I think was also so well put, that clothing is part of our dignity. And we see that even throughout scripture, and how, of course, after the fall in Genesis, when man is told to clothe himself and to make sure that we aren't revealing certain parts of our bodies to the public, and we have that inherent dignity, but there's in every aspect of everything we do, as the Bible also tells us, we should be doing it to the glory of God. And so if we are man versus woman, I as a woman should be dressing in order to affirm the dignity of who God created me to be, which is a woman, female. And when we talk about, I think a lot of churches and some people take it to an extreme when they talk about modesty. But what does modesty really mean? It means to not have a loud expression that goes against what God created us to be. We should have modesty in understanding that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit now. In as a Christian, I obviously would affirm that now the Holy Spirit resides within us as believers. And so we, in understanding that our bodies are a reflection of to whom we belong, which is God himself, the highest of all authorities, we need to reflect that in everything that we do. And so I think it's really fascinating as well when you're talking about this being a reflection of culture instead of this sort of androgynous nothingness. We see this also in aesthetics everywhere. And there's another account on social media that I follow called Culture Critic. I don't know if Necktie, if you've seen this account, but the entire point of this account is to show the type of architecture that was so beautiful historically, and now contrasting that to like the 70s and onward, that is bland and boring and nothing. And it's almost like the point of it is to say, look at when we reflect God's creation, how beautiful everything is, versus when we don't have hope and we've excised God from society, then we have this bland, boring, void, vapid nothingness that doesn't reflect beauty and doesn't reflect a creator. And we see that in clothing, we see that in culture, we see that in art, we see that everywhere, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't agree more. I can't agree more with every single thing that you said, because I talk about clothing, but all of this is related. All of these things are related. It's like an onion. Not only is there an onion of layers where you're looking at fabric, but you go deeper and deeper, and it means something about values, and it means something about culture. Then it means something about creation, and it means something about reality itself. Not only is there a sort of onion layer where you peel it back within only clothing, but this clothing is also just a smaller representation of the same phenomenon that we see in architecture and that we see even in ideas. Think about this. Our clothing is so sterile, and not ours, but people, the kind of clothing that is pushed onto people today is so sterile. It's so degrading. It is ugly, and it does make people feel bad. Same thing about our ideas. You can even have ugly ideas. You can have ideas that are sterile and ugly and that are devoid of anything meaningful. And it goes to architecture, to ideas, to thoughts, to our clothing, to everything. It's at every level. And like you said, there is this aspect of, this is where it gets to a deeper religious point, talking about holiness and dignity and modesty, and talk about what are you representing? And like you said, with modesty, we all have, some people might be more devoted and they're very modest. Some people slightly less, but if you're engaging with this idea about what that means, and you're aiming toward God, you're aiming toward holiness, you're aiming toward a reaffirmation of creation. And we do, like you said, then we wear clothes in Genesis. We start wearing clothes, and we do cover ourselves up, and these clothes are civilization, and these clothes are then what we have. We cover ourselves up, and they represent what is underneath those clothes, man or woman. And every single time I think that people don't think, they think it's only about the fabric, but it's not only about the fabric. This is not materialism. It's not trite materialism. It's not just, no, that's not it. It's not just commercialism. We're talking about a deeper thing. It's religious. It's philosophical, it's cultural, it's historical. And that's, I think, the key point for people to start to think about. They need to realize, or start to think about, wow, so what does that mean? what I'm wearing, and am I representing my faith and my culture and my people? And am I really doing that right? Am I really aiming for good? What am I doing here? And what's really going on? It's not just fabric.
Yeah, and making these decisions that are based on a true philosophy and the truth of the Bible and the truth of God, that we are made man and women, male and female, and doing everything that we do for the glory of God. Because some of these people, when we're talking about modesty, for example, modesty doesn't mean being bland and boring. And it doesn't mean that if you want to be, for example, feminine, that somehow you need to then completely take away any sort of sexual appeal, because the whole idea of being feminine is to look beautiful. And there is a component of human sexuality with that, which in the context of marriage in the Bible, in the right context, is a good thing. And so it's not to say that, men can't look good or women can't look beautiful, and that modesty, if done or exercised properly, means that we take all femininity and human sexuality out of it, because then we're actually denying that part of God's creation. And so I think when we're talking about these concepts of modesty and beauty and aesthetic and culture, the bigger overarching point that I think we're getting to in this conversation is that it's all a reflection of our Creator. And we can't just assume and have this assumption that whatever is the current mantra in the culture, which right now is this androgynous slop. I love how you put that. That's the right thing to do. And that, I'm just going to partake of this culture without thinking about what am I expressing and what parts of culture should I reject and say, no, that is actually a false ideology represented in that style. And therefore, I am going to reject that. And I'm going to purposefully choose different ways to present myself and present my body. I mean, and it's the same thing, too, with this whole notion of like working out, and how apparently, according to the leftists, like working out and being fit is now like white supremacist or racist or something like ridiculous like that. But it's like all of the leftists in this queer androgynous slop, they glorify obesity and really unhealthy, ugly versions of themselves, instead of saying, how am I presenting the best version of myself and understanding the good in nature? And it's not that we all have to be bodybuilders or look like movie stars or, some of the ways that I think we rightly critique the image and ideal of a perfect man or woman. Nobody, we all have different bodies, and that's fine. But the point is, we should all be trying to be the best version of ourselves, not for ourselves, but for God.
Exactly. Everything you said was just dead on. It's this modesty that I'll try to go through all of it so I don't forget, because you said so many great things. Modesty is not about being bland. It's not about being army green, only wearing black. You can't tell the difference between the forms. That's the point. That's not the point. You're supposed to be able to see the difference between the forms. We're not getting rid of the forms. And it's not about only wearing one color, monochrome. Absolutely not. I focus on Ivy style and preppy style. We specifically have lots of color. We are full of color. This is a specific historical style in America, and we have lots of color. It's not about dour. Dressing with a sense of dignity, dressing as a man with a sense of seriousness doesn't mean that you're an undertaker. Doesn't mean that you're dour. It doesn't mean that you're gloomy and grim. No, not at all. And so when we talk about modesty, it's not about that. And it's not about being dour. And like you said about this reaffirming what this leftist idea where they just glorify the most unhealthy modes of being and behavior, the same thing with clothing. This culture that we see, that we're up against, glorifies ways of being and ways of behaving and ways of dressing yourself that make you miserable. And that is kind of the point, is that no wonder men are so beat down. No wonder men are so low, because their clothes, among 100 other things, beat them down, drag them down. And that is what's encouraged. What's encouraged is to pursue ways of being and behaving and dressing that will make you feel worse about yourself. And that's a really wicked thing. It really is. And so when I talk about the importance of dressing with decency, it is, and like you said, not about comparing ourselves to others. It's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about your own decency and dignity. It's about the dignity of every man. It's about the decency that we are all created in the image of God, and we all have this capability and this ability. And what people are up against is something, it's almost like something's being pulled over their eyes. They're almost wearing lenses they can't see. And so I just see how there's 100 things that beat down men. And like I said, I speak specifically about men, and clothing is just one of them. But that's something we can change. We can't change certain things. There are certain things beyond our control. But what we can do is I say you are the total dictator. You are a monarch of your personal aesthetic. You can make any choice you want. You don't have to wait for the culture to say it's okay to dress in a strong image. You can start doing that today. You can start dressing in a way that resonates with the way your father dressed, or your grandfather dressed, or great-grandfather dressed. You can start to dress in a way that resonates historically and culturally with your culture and your people. And that is a totally different worldview than what we're surrounded in right now.
Yeah, 100%. And you can make the choice today to start reflecting in what you look like and how you present yourself, what your worldview is. And, I love, and I've always loved the quotation from the great philosopher that is Coco Chanel that said, she said, clothes won't change the world, but the women who wear them will.
Right.
And I always loved that because I thought everybody knows, men and women know that when you don't look great and you look like, the people of Walmart, you're not having a good day. But when you put yourself together and you have, whether it's a great suit for a man or it's, a great feminine aesthetic for a woman, and you feel good about how you look, that does change your attitude. It changes your view of yourself. It changes others' view of you because you are projecting your worldview in that. And so when you look at fashion and you look at what the expression is that particular designer or that particular type of clothing, like athleisure, is trying to tell, what story are they trying to tell through that? What image are they trying to project? We all know this, and we know this consciously. It's not even subconsciously. And so I think the overall message here that you're presenting is absolutely 100% correct, that we need to have a reflection of how we present ourselves, a reflection of a truthful, God-based worldview, and that there's a measurable difference between men and women, beauty and ugly, right and wrong, modesty and modesty, all of those things. And we need to think through that and not just accept the presumptions of our current culture and the androgynous nothingness. We need to, on purpose, say, I am a man or I'm a woman made in the image of God. I have inherent dignity and worth, and I'm going to reflect that in the image of God that is stamped upon me, that other people can see through what I look like. So Necktie Salvage, really appreciate that. Closing thoughts. Yeah, because this has been a fascinating conversation, and I absolutely support and love what you're doing with this message.
Thank you. Thank you. The message that I would say, the closing thoughts I would say, is that if you're a guy or a girl, but I speak specifically to guys, but to everyone, you might oppose what's going on out there. You might not be able to change all of it because it might be beyond your control. And maybe you can't even say with your words, with your voice, every single day what you want to say, but you can say it in your aesthetic. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Same thing about an outfit. In our world, if you're a man, if you reject this slop, if you reject the infantile, low version of man, the version of man, the clothing that the mainstream culture wants you to wear, if you reject that and you put effort into your personal aesthetic and you reflect your culture and you present a strong image of man, you are doing real damage to the negative, cruel forces that are trying to lower the world aesthetically. You really are. You are saying something for good You're saying something for good, and you can say that in your personal aesthetic. You can represent man in strength, and that will rub off. The more you do it, other men will be inspired. And even men who are younger, or young kids, young boys, maybe your sons, or maybe your nephews, or that is how culture works. What do you want to represent? Do you want to be a force for good, for higher man, or lower androgynous nothingness? And we can all make that choice every single day when we wake up in the morning. It doesn't mean dressing formally every single day. If you'd like to dress formally, do it. But there's different times. There's a time for everything. To get biblical with it. And so there is a time for informality. There's a time for formality as well. But in every instance, formality or informality, every day of your life, you can send a higher signal. You can represent something higher of man rather than lower. And you can do real good for spreading something that is a good message rather than a negative one.
Mm-hmm. Really well said. So Necktie Salvage, follow him on social media, on Twitter, which is now X. I think that's hilarious. Speaking of androgynous nothingness, it's just a giant X. But really appreciate your insights. And this has been a really fascinating discussion. So thanks so much for coming on, and hope to speak with you on more of this soon.
Thank you.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
On MyPillow's 20-year anniversary, with over 80 million MyPillows sold, Mike Lindell wants to thank each and every one of you by giving you the lowest price in history on his MyPillows. You will receive a queen-size MyPillow for only $19.98. The regular price is $69.98 and just $10 more for a king size. You'll receive deep discounts on all MyPillow products, such as bed sheets, mattress toppers, pet beds, mattresses, my slippers, which I love, and so much more. This is the time to try out some of the amazing products you've had your eye on from MyPillow. So go to mypillow.com and enter promo code Jenna to receive this amazing offer on the queen size MyPillow for $19.98. You can go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475. Be sure to use the promo code Jenna. This offer comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. It's time to start getting the quality sleep you deserve. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna.